Alright, so WBC president Mauricio Solomon, he has. I'll read it here. So this is coming from Sky Sports. It's with regards to the situation with Tyson Fury. So obviously with Tyson Fury, he's been teasing a big announcement for the last couple of days now. We're no sooner to finding out what that announcement is. We may know in the next day or so. I don't know yet. But he's been teasing that all the while. Well, if you go back to the start of the year, there was talk of Solomon ordering Wilder versus Ruiz for a mandatory crack at Tyson Fury. The winner gets a mandatory crack. But that fight fell by the wayside. And it doesn't seem like that fight is going to take place after all now. So it kind of freed up the WBC in terms of a mandatory. But they obviously still have to try and get one resolved. So when you look through the rankings, you would say, well, if Ruiz and Wilder aren't going to get it, if Ruiz is turned down, apparently a crack at Tyson Fury anyway, Wilder and Joshua, they're looking to go and just fight each other, that would leave someone like Frank Sanchez. Now, I understand that you might want to order an eliminator or something like that, but in some cases, they'll just, and the WBC have done this, literally just name someone as mandatory without having to do anything, because they have done that in the past. But not on this occasion, it seems, because Solomon has confirmed on a statement via Sky Sports that WBC will not now select a new mandatory for Tyson Fury's heavyweight world championship. So it basically frees up Tyson Fury to do whatever he wants. It frees him up to fight whoever. Obviously, if he's looking to take a voluntary, as far as I'm aware, it has to be in the top 15 of the WBC. That's a rule that still stands. But here is just another example of the WBC. It's one rule for one champion, another rule for another champion. Because they've done this repeatedly. True, like Solomon is, without a doubt, the worst, most hypocritical guy in boxing. I mean, this is a guy who has said that Dimitri Bivol can't fight either Canelo or Beterbiev for a crack at undisputed at 175 or 168 because he feels that the situation that's going on now is an abuse of power, right? And you've got this clown who every chance he gets, he abuses his power. You can't make it up with Mauricio Solomon. Every single chance he gets, he abuses his power. And here's another example. You know, you want to look at examples where a fighter has tried to make another fight and the WBC instantly have come down and said, not going to happen, and if it does happen, you're going to get stripped. Or they have stripped fighters. You know, a good example would be, let's go back to 2016. Tony Bellew, WBC Cruiserweight Champion, beat Lunga Makabu, had a voluntary defence against BJ Flores. On the undercard of that fight, Myris Briedis fought Simon Vallily. Myris Briedis was mandatory. I believe he got that mandatory crack after beating Ola Duradola in the summer of 2016. So he was mandatory for Tony Bellew. Now at the time, Tony Bellew, I'm sure they would have went ahead and had that mandatory, but obviously David Haye was making noise. He was mentioning Bellew. They had that face-to-face, or interaction I should say, at that fight. And they eventually announced Bellew versus Haye. Now, easy to look back in hindsight and say, well, David Haye was shot to pieces. Yeah, he was, but we didn't know to what extent at that stage. But Tony Bellew wanted to go up to heavyweight and he wanted to fight David Haye, right? They didn't even give him a chance to sort out, maybe step aside or delay the mandatory, forego it, anything. Instantly, you're stripped. Now, I know they made him champion in recess for whatever that's worth, but essentially they were like, you ain't fighting David Haye, you got to defend your title, and if you don't defend it, we're stripping you. So they stripped him. But with others, you know, Deontay Wilder is a prime example. I mean, Deontay Wilder, he got a mandatory crack at Bermain Stavern by beating Malik Scott, of all people, in 2014. He goes on and he fights Bermain Stavern January 2015. He doesn't get a mandatory called until November 2017. And the mandatory they called was Bermain Stavern, who'd only had one fight in the interim. And that was against Derek Rossi, a journeyman, in a fight in which he got dropped. That's it. And he had that fight in November 2015. So he had his fight with Derek Rossi in November 2015. He didn't fight again until November 2017, at which point he was mandatory challenger for the WBC. This is the kind of BS that the WBC do. They are unbelievable. They are the worst. All the sanctioned bodies are bad in a way. You know, some people would say the WBO are not as bad, nor the IBF. The WBO have done some questionable decisions. I've certainly seen that. And they're very close with Bob Arum and Frank Warren. And the IBF, likewise, have had some very questionable decisions. I mean, at the end of the day, the IBF, I said it in Review of the Week, and for those who don't know, Tim Tszyu fought Carlos Acapo, I think that's how you say his name, on Sunday. That was at £154. he'd only lost to Sebastian Fondora and Errol Spence. He lost to Errol Spence in the summer. I can't remember what month it was. It was in the summer of 2018, right? That was a mandatory defence for Errol Spence for the IBF. That was 2018, 5 years ago. He has not had another mandatory called since then. A Capo, I think that's how you say his name. I'm probably saying it wrong, but I'm just trying to think off the top of my head what his name is. That was the last mandatory Spence had. 5 years. 5 years at welterweight and no mandatory from the IBF. So they're all just as bad. But the WBC are particularly shameful when it comes to this kind of thing. So what this essentially means is it gives, if you look at it in the case of a glass is half full mentality, which is what I'm trying to do, it means in one sense that it frees up the Alexander Usyk fight in the winter. It means that there's not going to be any mandatory coming out of the side. There's not going to be a kind of Dylan White scenario where there's a mandatory called and he really digs his heels in and is like, I want this fight. I want this fight. I'm going to go down arbitration here and stuff like that. It frees that up. But it also means it gives Fury carte blanche to fight God knows who. God forbid John Jones. Seriously, if they did that, imagine Tyson Fury defending the WBC heavyweight title against John Jones, who's never had a fight under Queensberry rules in his life. Imagine that. That really would stink. Now, in terms of Tyson Fury's next move, there's an article here from Sports Daily 24 in which Bob Arum says he doesn't actually expect Tyson Fury to fight this summer. He actually believes that Tyson Fury will wait just to fight Alexander Usyk come what, December. That's exactly what he's saying here. He actually told Pro Box TV, I really think any of the money that anybody is talking about for the fight pales in comparison to what they could make in the Middle East. They're waiting now, both fighters, for the end of the year to fight each other in the Middle East because that's where the big money is. Right now, I think he's going to wait, but with Tyson, it depends on how he wakes up in the morning. Ain't that the truth? So that's the situation there. Now, with Bob Arum, obviously Arum has been more, how would I describe it? He's not been enabling Fury to get away with some of his nonsense and statements as much as Frank Warren has. So maybe for that reason, obviously Tyson Fury is still signed with Bob Arum, he's co-promoted. Maybe Arum is a bit more out of the loop than, say, a Frank Warren, because Warren is still, and he's wheeled out people like Gareth A. Davis and that weirdo Colin Hart to, champion Tyson Fury and, say Usyk is this, that, and give it a rest. So maybe he's not in the know. I do not know. But this is the situation with Tyson Fury. If he's teasing an announcement, might not be well. Don't expect expect probably a big cash grab with a lot of money involved, especially now if he's freed up with the WBC for the time being anyway. It could mean good. If Bob Arum is saying what he's saying there and that turns out to be true and him and Usyk don't fight, although I think the Usyk Dubois fight is more than likely going to happen, it does in theory mean that the next fight will be Usyk Fury for both. And it means that there'll be no mandatories in the way if step aside gets sorted. Certainly with Usyk anyway, with the WBC there's no mandatories now, we know that. So let's watch. Let's wait and see. That's my thoughts on this whole situation. Let me know yours in the comments below. Are you even surprised? Because I've said it once, I'll say it again. These sanctioning bodies, the IBF are included in that, as the WBO and the WBA. They have their favourites. They have their fighters. Canelo is the darling of the WBC. We know that, right? We know that. Bob Arum, Frank Warren, very close relationship with the WBO. Eddie Hearn does tend to like his fighters to go down the WBA road. The IBF are kind of in the middle. There's no real promoter who really has a massive affinity with them, but you would say with Hearn, the WBA, he does always tend to get his fighters early on in their careers fighting for little tricky WBA titles. And normally when a fighter wins a title with Eddie Hearn, it's a WBA title. Normally, not always, but normally. So all these promoters, they have their favourite. And all these sanctioning bodies, likewise, they have their favourite. And you see the treatment that some get and some don't get. So that's my thoughts on this whole situation. Let me know yours in the comments. Leave a like, smash the like button on the way in or on the way out. I'll chat to you later. Peace.